The story of Moses is probably one of the best told stories in the Bible, next only to the stories of Jesus' life and creation in Genesis. It is so popular that it has been adapted many times over the years in various media, with the most recent adaptation being the Netflix documentary series The Covenant from 2024. But what makes the story of Moses so remarkable? Well, aside from being a classic tale of a humble hero saving his people with divine help, there are many parts of the story that are just unimaginable. Like that bit where he parted the Red Sea so his people could cross. But what if we told you that this extraordinary event could have really happened? That long ago the Red Sea may have split down the middle, allowing the Israelites to escape Egypt? How would you react if we told you that many other events in the Bible, some of them just as hard to believe, really happened? In fact, the Bible is the world's best-selling book of all time, with an estimated 5 to 7 billion copies sold as of 2024, approximately. For most devout Christians, the Bible is the inspired Word of God. Some take it literally, while others consider it more metaphorical. But the discoveries we are about to share with you confirm some parts of the Bible that suggest there is more to it than artistic fiction. In the late 1800s, professional and amateur archaeologists flocked to the Middle East to get their hands on one of the most amazing discoveries related to the Bible. The long-lost city of Nineveh is discovered. Nineveh is mentioned several times in the Bible. According to the book of Genesis, it was the city founded by Noah's grandson, Asher. It is also the same city where God sent the prophet Jonah to preach. For a long time, however, Nineveh was thought to be a mythical city. Excavations between 1842 and 1847 confirmed that Nineveh was once a prosperous large city in Assyria. Interestingly, the word Assyria sounds close to Asher. The city of Jericho is another important place mentioned in the Bible. Unlike Nineveh, Jericho continued to exist as a city from 9000 BC. In fact, it is one of the oldest cities in the world. As such, there are 23 layers of ancient sites documented dating back 11,000 years. These most likely include remains from the time of Joshua and from the later time of Jesus himself. A detailed video about the ancient biblical city of Jericho can be found on our channel. But what do you think is one of the most important discoveries in biblical archaeology? Many of you probably guessed it right away: the Dead Sea Scrolls. Found in 1947 by a Bedouin shepherd, the scrolls contain fragments of one of the oldest manuscripts related to the Bible, both canonical and not. Prior to the Dead Sea Scrolls, the oldest known extensive manuscript of the Hebrew Bible was dated to the 10th and 11th centuries. The discovery of the Dead Sea Scrolls set back our documentary evidence for the Hebrew Bible text by about 1,000 years. In other words, it proved that biblical texts were in circulation before the early Middle Ages, which in turn confirms their antiquity. You can watch a detailed video about the scrolls on our channel. In 1993, a stone tablet was discovered in Tel Dan, Israel, another city mentioned in the Bible. Archaeologists noticed inscriptions on the stele, and one particular sequence was highlighted. Note this in the wiki photo. There, those letters are in white, which some researchers believe refers to the house of King David. If this is true, it would confirm that there was indeed a family of rulers whose origins can be traced to the biblical David. During the heyday of biblical archaeology, another important stele was discovered in 1868 that confirms events in the Bible. Whether due to mistrust or the opportunity to make more money, the stone tablet was smashed to pieces. Fortunately, it was later fully restored. Called the Mesha Stele, or the Moab Stone, this artifact is believed to have been created to commemorate King Mesha's victory over the Israelites. The text begins, "I am Mesha, son of Chemosh, king of Moab." The text then recounts the events of a war mentioned in the Book of Kings. There, the king of Israel makes an alliance with two other kings to quell the rebellious vassal Mesha. The three kings win the campaign until Mesha, in desperation, sacrifices his eldest son to his god. The sacrifice changes the course of events. Great wrath befalls Israel, and Mesha achieves victory. It is interesting that the Bible emphasizes the Israelites' successful counterattacks against the Moabites, and the stele emphasizes King Mesha's victories in battle. Another famous discovery that is associated with an ancient ruler is the cylinder of Cyrus. Inscribed in cuneiform and dating from the 6th century BC, It contains the imperial edict of the first king of Persia, Cyrus the Great. But what does this have to do with the Bible? Well, the cylinder also mentions allowing exiles to return to their homeland. This particular event is mentioned in the book of Ezra, where after the defeat of Babylon, Cyrus issues a decree allowing the Jews to return to Israel and build the second temple. Deuteronomy 11:29 mentions the curse upon Mount Ebal, imposed by God. When the Lord your God brings you into the land you are entering to possess it, you shall proclaim on Mount Gerizim the blessings and on Mount Ebal the curses. While this sounds ominous, did you know that a curse tablet was actually discovered on the mountain in 2019? It said, "You are cursed by the God, cursed. You will die. Cursed, cursed, you will surely die. Cursed you are by cursed." In addition, the place where the inscription was found is known by another name, the Altar of Joshua. Some archaeologists believe that this is the altar built by Naboth on Mount Ebal according to Moses' instructions. Unfortunately, scholars are skeptical of the two discoveries on the mountain as actually related to the Bible. But we'll wait and see. We head to one of the most intriguing artifacts ever discovered, the Ishmael Papyrus. Oddly enough, it was found in the most unlikely place, in Montana, USA. An unknown Montana man received a small piece of paper from his mother as an inheritance. However, when the paper ended up in the possession of a professor, he analyzed it and was shocked. It was an authentic artifact. Even more surprising was that radiocarbon dating and paleographic style dated the discovery to the time of the first temple, making it one of the oldest biblical artifacts in existence. The piece of paper is a fragment of a letter written on papyrus addressed to a person named Ishmael. Exactly who this Ishmael was remains unknown. Some believe it is the Ishmael of Jeremiah 40, who overthrew Gedaliah, the first governor of Judea under Babylon. Other artifacts also mention an Ishmael who descended from a royal family, but it is still uncertain whether this is the same person. Speaking of the oldest records, the Ketef Hinnom scrolls may hold the record for the most ancient surviving texts related to the Hebrew Bible. The scrolls date back to 600 BC and contain text that corresponds to the Book of Numbers. Like the Dead Sea Scrolls, the Ketef Hinnom scrolls, discovered in 1979, shift the existence of Hebrew manuscripts to an even earlier period. This only shows that parts of the Bible were in use even before the birth of Christ, confirming the antiquity and continuity of the text. Did you know that the ruins of Capernaum, a location frequently mentioned in the Bible, still exist today? They were discovered in 1838. In the Bible, Capernaum is a fishing village located on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, where Jesus went and met with some of the apostles. However, Jesus sort of rebukes the place for rejecting his teaching. Nevertheless, it is believed that he chose this city as the center of his ministry to reach more people. Peter's house is also located in Capernaum, and archaeologists have discovered it. In one area in the locality, there were collapsed buildings and a courtyard, which is where Peter's house was located. For centuries, even after the death of Christ, this house was revered by all and was renovated many times. Later, a church was built on it. Even more intriguing, archaeologists discovered an inscription on the wall that included Peter's name. Speaking of names inscribed on surfaces, another major discovery in recent decades has been the confirmation that Pontius Pilate actually existed. In 1961, a stone block engraved with the name of Pontius Pilate was discovered in Caesarea, Israel. It also includes his title Prefect of Judea. What makes the discovery so significant is that until this time, Pilate had only been mentioned in the Bible, apocryphal texts, and brief notes by a few historians. The presence of a material artifact that mentions him directly and is dated as being made in Jesus' time only further confirms the events mentioned in the Gospels. The Book of Chronicles describes Hezekiah digging a tunnel to prepare for Sennacherib's invasion and to provide men for his city. No such tunnel was found, at least until 1838, when explorers came across one in present-day Silwan, Jerusalem. It was 530 meters. Historically, this structure provided water to Jerusalem from the Gihon Spring. Today, the site is open to the public. One of the greatest events in the Old Testament was the Great Flood, which wiped out the old world in the time of Noah. It's hard to imagine how the earth was engulfed in massive floods to the point that even the mountains were practically underwater. But did you know that the Great Flood was most likely a real catastrophe that happened in ancient times? There are several theories that could underlie the narrative. One is that the flood was not worldwide, but regional. In particular, the Levant region may have suffered cataclysmic events when the Tigris and Euphrates rivers overflowed. Another version is that floods affected the Mediterranean and the Black Sea. Even if the flood was confined to one particular place, in terms of the toll that was given and the scale of the whole event, it must have been a real cataclysm. The other theory is that a comet may have struck the seas and caused widespread flooding. There is no direct evidence to prove that such an event happened less than 10,000 years ago, but it could be possible. After all, we know what happened to the dinosaurs, don't we? It's also worth noting that the end of the Younger Dryas about 11,000 years ago could have meant a rise in sea level globally. During the Younger Dryas, the planet was colder and covered with more than 6 billion cubic meters of ice compared to today. The melting of all that ice would mean huge floods everywhere. A detailed video of the proven Black Sea flood can be found on our channel. Speaking of massive floods spanning entire continents, how about the sea splitting in two? Yes, we have finally arrived at the topic from the introduction. One of the great highlights of Moses' story is how he led the enslaved Israelites to freedom. Then God instructs him to perform miracles. When Pharaoh refused to let the Israelites go, God sent the 10 plagues to the Egyptians. Then, when Pharaoh reluctantly let the enslaved go but began to angrily pursue them, God helped Moses divide the Red Sea in two so they could cross safely. Once they successfully crossed, the sea returned to its normal state and swallowed the pursuing Egyptians into the watery depths. Everything Moses and Aaron did with God's help was nothing short of miraculous. To the modern secular view, this is impossible. But is it? Let's look at the passage from Exodus. Then the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea, that the waters may return upon the Egyptians, their chariots and their horsemen." The Egyptians ran toward it, and the Lord swept them away. The water came back and covered the chariots and horsemen, the whole army of Pharaoh that had followed the Israelites into the sea. Not one of them survived. In 2010, computer simulations done by American scientists showed how the movement of the wind could literally part the waters and create a land bridge. In their simulation, winds of 100 kilometers, 63 miles per hour, could push water out of a riverbed. By pushing the water aside, people can safely cross mudflats for several hours. As soon as the wind dies down, however, the water level returns to normal. Sound familiar? Because this is the exact scenario that could have created the perfect conditions for Moses and the Israelites. Thousands of years ago, they hardly knew about this, but in Exodus we read, "Then Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord made the sea recede with a strong east wind all night, and turned the sea into dry land, and the waters were parted, and the waters were a wall to them on the right hand and on the left." To be completely fair, some parts of the punishments upon Egypt could also be explained by science. For example, the blood-red Nile could be explained by the blooms of toxic red algae that can make the river a blood-like color. As a consequence of the water's toxicity, animals such as frogs and mosquitoes may have tried to escape the unbearable Nile ecosystem, leading to a kind of frog and mosquito invasion. It is difficult to explain the plague of the firstborn naturally alone, but some argue that it could still be a consequence of the toxic Nile case. Whether it is a natural phenomenon or divine intervention, the fact is that science supports the possibility of these events to some degree. Biblical archaeology continues to evolve today. The discoveries that have been made only show that we know so little about our own past, and the things we deny as unreal could actually be true historical facts. If you want to learn about great historical events that did not happen the way you think they did, continue with the video to the left of your screen.